Welcome to Ideas in Action, the official University of Southern California podcast. This show was recorded live on USC's campus.
To this special discussion we're having about the coronavirus and how to talk with your parents about the pandemic and about social distancing. I'm Dr. Laura Mosqueda. I'm the Dean of the Keck School of Medicine of USC, and I specialize in geriatric medicine, in other words, care of older adults. And my friend.
Hello, I am Dr. Bonnie Olson. I am a psychologist and I'm the Vice Chair of Research for the Department of Family Medicine at Keck School of Medicine. I'm joining Dr. Mosqueda to talk about COVID-19 and the global pandemic. We have a number of highly asked questions that we'd like to take some time to answer today. And we'll be also taking some questions from you from Facebook Live. So please post them for us.
Well, this is a very serious time. There's no doubt about that. Here at USC and the Keck School of Medicine, we're busily preparing for what might be an onslaught of people who are seriously ill. But we're so grateful that it looks like some of the social distancing measures being used across the state of California really might be working, and that we haven't seen the numbers that we could be seeing. So in this very kind of crazy making time and very serious time, we thought it might be fun just to open with something that talked about social distancing, let's say in a more lighthearted way. So we're going to share a little video that I really think is just terrific.
Hi, I'm Max Brooks. I'm 47 years old. This is my dad, Mel Brooks. Hi, Dad. He's 93. If I get the coronavirus, I'll probably be okay. But if I give it to him, he could give it to Carl Reiner, who could give it to Dick Van Dyke, and before I know it, I've wiped out a whole generation of comedic legends. When it comes to coronavirus, I have to think about who I can infect, and so should you. So practice social distancing. Avoid crowds, wash your hands, keep 6 feet away from people, and if you've got the option to stay home, just stay home. Do your part, don't be a spreader. Right, Dad?
Right. Go home.
I'm going.
Go.
Love you.
All right. Well, I hope you didn't mind us starting with something a little lighthearted to get into this serious topic. But what we're going to do now is run through a few questions that had been.
Rex Moore with the Motley Fool.
Whoops.
On a BMW self-driving exam.
That's the fun thing about Facebook Live is you get to see some errors being made. So what we're going to do now is roll into a few questions that have come up, and then we'll also invite you to type some messages in as well that we could answer real time. And Dr. Olson and I have worked together for a very long time. I'm trying to remember how many years, but 20 maybe?
More than 20, I'd say.
More than 20.
Yes.
And so we're very comfortable as a geriatrician and a geropsychologist, kind of going back and forth and making this pretty conversational. One of the questions that come up is that there are a lot of news stories saying that baby boomers not taking this whole coronavirus threat seriously, and are they at a higher risk? So now I'm going to be talking to this as a person who's about to turn 60 in less than 2 weeks. So I'm kind of at the lower age of that baby boom group. But I do recognize that sometimes we just think we're invincible, even when we're at the age of 60, 65, and 70. The reality, though, is that we are at higher risk from this illness. When we look, interestingly, even at infants and very small children who we often think don't have very well developed immune systems, even though they might test positive for the virus, they're not getting that sick. The people who are really getting ill from the virus are people over the age of 60, and even more so, people over the age of 80. And so this is a very real risk for all of us over the age of 60, and the older we get, the higher the risk. One other comment before I turn it over to Dr. Olson is that it isn't just our chronologic age, but our physiologic age. So a very healthy 80-year-old might do better than a 65-year-old who has a lot of chronic illnesses. That might include things like autoimmune diseases, maybe somebody under treatment for cancer and their immune system is suppressed, maybe somebody who has diabetes who isn't well controlled, a history of stroke, lung disease, heart disease, etc. But Dr. Olson, maybe you could talk a little bit about what is it about us in this age group that maybe makes us think we're not at that higher risk?
Well, I think that there could be lots of different reasons. Some people may be working off of inaccurate information. There's been a lot of changing information coming out of the news, and it seems to change every day. But I think that often people are not basing their understanding on accuracy. So that's one way. But it's also that sometimes people may not see it happening to them because they see it as something way out there in the distance. It's something that happens to other people that they've been able to manage in life, avoiding major catastrophes and believing that this is yet another one that they'll be able to skirt around the edges of. What I would say is don't assume that you know why an older adult might not see themselves at much risk. I would ask them, find out what they're thinking about it. That's going to be the most important part. Okay. So if someone is worried about parents that are not doing enough to protect themselves, we have a question that's about what's the best way to engage older adults on this topic. So if you have parents who are not practicing social distancing as much as you think they ought to be, I would really encourage you to do two things. One is, before you start that conversation, is to go in prepared. So look for some good, solid, evidence-based information about coronavirus and COVID-19, and get that in the language and the culturally appropriate format. There's all kinds of things available on the internet that you can find that is really reliable and based on good science. I would get that information and bring that with you as you're going to start that conversation with your parents. And then I would always encourage people to start that conversation with questions. Ask questions, listen until you feel like you understand what your parents are thinking about this. It's only when you understand where they are with it that you're going to be able to have an impact on changing their perspectives. So that's
I love that you put it that way, because I think our tendency is, well, you're just not doing enough. And, this tendency for us to sort of come at our parents sometimes to tell them what they should do, and without recognizing that these are people who, in some cases, have been through World War II or have had incredible life experience, and they know what they're talking about. They know what they believe for themselves, and oftentimes coming at them is not the best way to change the mind. So I love that idea of start by listening. I think that's kind of what you're saying.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. It is really striking to me, I'll say, as a physician, that we want to just give people all the facts and figures, and sometimes we don't remember the emotional component behind this as well.
Yeah, I think it's really critical that you understand not just the thinking part of it, the more cognitive side of how older adults are thinking about this with the information, but also how it feels to them. I was speaking to an older adult this week who related this experience of going through this social isolation now to how it felt to her when she was 7 years old and she had been interned during World War II.
Wow.
So she said that experience helps her to come at this experience with some ability to adapt and a sense of being resilient. And I think those are the kinds of things that we want to hear from older adults. Sort of, what do they have to bring to this experience that's going to help them adapt and do a better job of it? That's when I would be having those conversations and listening for those kinds of ideas.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I know our game plan was to go through the questions that have been written out for us, but I'm going to break our game plan and actually get to a question that was asked, because I think it really is apropos of what we're talking about right now. Somebody saying, hey, my parents are in their 70s. They've been smoking since they were in their teens. And how does it heighten their risk of getting sick? And is it worth trying to get them to stop now? And so, absolutely, we know that just about anybody who smokes is going to have lung disease. There's just no doubt about that. And it absolutely increases their risk of severe illness if they end up getting this COVID-19 virus. There's no doubt about that. But it kind of gets this question of, well, is this just a scare tactic way to get somebody to stop smoking? Is this kind of when you're under a lot of stress right now, which is when you might want to be smoking more? Is this also the time to talk about stopping smoking? What do you think?
I'd have to say no. I think that will just add fuel to the fire of stress and anxiety and all the things that people are really struggling with right now. And clearly, the smoking, as you say, it's going to increase the risk. But stopping today, even if they were able to stop today, probably isn't going to reduce that risk significantly. So,
yeah,
I'd pick a different fight to have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that we absolutely, of course, would love to help them to stop smoking, but there's some reason they've been smoking since their teens, and they're probably well addicted, and they might be pretty terrified and end up feeling guilty if they can't stop right now as well, which won't lead to anything good at the moment. So I'm going to move along, and we have a question about taking parents who need to go to their medical appointments and if they should wear a mask. I'm going to take that one on, if that's okay, Dr. Olson. Sure. It's such a really, we're talking about this all the time right now as a geriatrician and as a geropsychologist. Here at USC, we're doing a lot of telemedicine. We had already been ramping up on this, and we're doing it even more. And that might mean using things like Zoom or other teleconferencing abilities in order to provide patient care, or even just the telephone. But there are times when you really need to go into the doctor's office. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing to really mitigate the risk. Nobody comes into our office building unless we've checked their temperature and we've asked them a series of questions. This isn't just our patients and their families coming through. These are the healthcare workers as well. So we're screening everybody who comes through our doors. And if they don't seem to have any risk, they end up wearing a large green dot on their clothing, meaning that they've been screened, that they're okay to come in. And then we have everybody wearing just regular surgical masks, just again to provide an extra layer of protection. We're obsessed with hand washing, and clearly, if anybody has a cough, we might be using extra special precautions. You may have heard of these things called N95 masks. So we're being very, very careful, because there are times when people really do need to come in order to get seen. So Dr. Olson, I'm just going to ask, should we keep going with these questions, or since we're getting some good ones on the Facebook Live, should we go with those and have a little fun?
Sure. I'll read off the next one from Sonia, who says that her mother is 69 and she has been hoarding a lot of food and cleaning supplies. Sonia asked her to please stop going to the store because she has plenty already and it's putting her more at risk. How do I help her with her panicking about having enough? Interestingly, Sonia writes, I think it might have something to do with her being an immigrant who went through some very difficult times of going without. And boy, that does speak to, it sounds like Sonia has some pretty good insight into her mother. I would guess that is related. And certainly when we've had a trauma, like having some period of time of going without and having some significant need from the past, going through something like this, it's going to trigger those kinds of traumas again. And that emotional response may not be very rational. It may be really driven by how it feels more than what our reasoning is able to really help us through. What I would encourage Sonia to do is to sit down and talk with her mom about what it feels like right now and what it felt like before. And then once those emotions get processed a little bit, then it's a lot easier to start to look at, where enough is enough and how are more productive ways to manage the anxiety that sounds like her mother is probably struggling with. So there are some really good ways to manage that worry and anxiety that people struggle with. There's a very sort of common and well researched and well understood strategy where people are called mindfulness that really can help calm down that anxious feeling when people feel like it's out of control and I don't know what to do. That's just one idea, but there's many other things that people can do to manage the anxiety. I would look at the hoarding as coming from that, likely.
Yeah, and it's sort of interesting. I think, we tend to medicalize things and throw medicines at people, but trying these non-medication kind of related techniques is so important to do first. And I know sometimes in my office, I'll go through breathing exercises with my patients. And maybe Sonia can even do that with her mom and just say, we're going to breathe together a little bit, kind of to the mindfulness stuff that you're talking about as well, so that you're doing it with your mom and not just kind of giving her a lecture on what she should do. Because there is such a strong, it can be a really overwhelming feeling that people have when they start getting panicked and anxious. So the best time I think you'd agree with me, to do this is when they're not in that kind of heightened emotional state.
Sure, absolutely. When someone is in that kind of state, pretty much you just need to help them to settle down. And it's the in-between times when you can do more of that processing of the emotional problems that came from the past and connect up to today.
Yeah.
But whatever helps that individual kind of settle down and feel more in control of their world, those are the kinds of things that really help anxiety.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to go to the next question here. We might scroll up just a little bit so I can see the top of it. And this is something Dr. Olson and I were talking last night that we wanted to cover, from somebody who says, my mom is in her 80s and she has Alzheimer's disease, kind of mid-stage Alzheimer's. She lives with me, but she's prone to wandering, which is already kind of hard on the family. And she said she's in a high-risk demographic, right? She's in her 80s. And she's saying, Victoria's saying, I'm trying to explain to her why she needs to stay home, why she can't go to her social group because she goes to a daycare, it's Groundhog Day. She's explaining to her the same thing every day. She said she seems to remember that something is wrong, but doesn't recall that there's a global pandemic. Any tips on talking with her? Do I just need to have the same conversation every day? So yes, you do need to have the same conversation every day. And one of the really tough things is not getting frustrated with it. And, I think one good way to kind of empathize with people of Alzheimer's disease is to keep reminding yourself, this is a medical illness. They are not doing it to annoy you. They really can't help it. The part of their brain that's involved in making new memories is broken. And because of that, no matter how hard they try, they just can't get it. They don't remember the facts. But what people, especially in middle stage Alzheimer's disease, often do remember is the emotional component of things. Mm-hmm. So they'll know something is different, or they'll know everybody around me is upset and something is up and I can't do my normal routine. And so that can increase behaviors like wandering, agitation, and other sorts of behaviors that are problematic to the loved ones. And so what we want to do is respond in a compassionate way, and in a way that acknowledges, that gets to the feeling. I know you're afraid and everything's okay, but trying to explain a global pandemic, don't think I would go there. So acknowledging the emotion, and then depending on what's going on with your mom, we often talk about distraction techniques. So it may be that if mom is beginning to ratchet up and start to wander, she can either have a safe space that you can make for her to wander in, or you can have different kinds of distractions. It might be something like a photo album or some of her favorite music. I'll kick it over to Dr. Olson for other sorts of ideas or responses to this.
Sure. What I know happens with patients who have dementia and had been attending a day program, for instance, where they were well situated and really enjoying the structure and the socialization that comes with that. When you take that away suddenly because of something like this episode, this panic situation, it really has a profound effect on people with dementia. So what I would encourage family members who are in that caregiving role to do is, as much as possible, recreate some kind of structure in the home environment. It's going to take a little while, but the better you are at recreating some structure around doing things at the same time or creating little routines that you go through every day, that will create some safety and consistency. So then the person who has dementia is less likely to have those sort of behavioral problems. It won't go away entirely, but it certainly does bring it down a whole lot.
Yeah.
And it also gives the caregiver an idea about what you can do, not just, oh my gosh, stop this bad thing from happening, but actually replace it with some more productive activities. So find some social things that you can do together. Do a puzzle, something.
The other thing I would point out is recognize what's going on within yourself, because this can be a pretty stressful thing. And if you've been used to, for your routine, mom going to a daycare program, and now she's there with you all the time, you can end up getting pretty upset yourself. And it's really important to recognize when your anger is rising, important to recognize when you're getting upset, and you can end up doing things that you're kind of ashamed of, yelling at somebody, getting a little too physical, and getting into crossing over to behaviors that one could consider kind of abusive. So be really aware of how you're doing. Step away from a situation if you feel yourself ramping up, and it's a good time to phone a friend or call somebody and say, hey, I need some help here.
Right. There's a lot of resources available to folks who are at home providing caregiving to someone with dementia on their own during this episode. So there's lots of agencies around that you should reach out to, and make sure you know what those resources are, that you have access to them before you need them, so that you're a bit prepared. Avoid those really tough situations.
I know we're both big fans of the Alzheimer's Association, LA Alzheimer's, and they do a great job and have all kinds of wonderful resources for caregivers, as does the Caregiver Alliance, both great groups with solid information on them. Can we please scroll down for other questions?
Right here.
Okay.
This is the same one you had.
All right.
This is it.
Okay.
That might be.
This is a new one?
So we have another question about hoarding. No, I think we already talked about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I think we end in like 3 minutes. Is that right? And so maybe we'll try and do one other quick one here.
One of the questions that we have here that I think might be worthwhile to talk about is that as you engage with older adults during this period, it may be that they're worried about things beyond getting sick from the virus itself. Just as the whole community has been reeling with loss of employment, their normal routines upended, people working from home, children being home and not in school. There's also things that affect older adults that we may not think about through their lens. So for them, often the financial issues involved with what's going on now can be a huge source of anxiety and worry. So I just mentioned that is that there may be things that you may not think that are on older adults' minds. And it's really important to ask them, what is it they're worried about? What's the thing that's most important to them right now? And I think that will help you to engage in a conversation that you're more likely to get further and get more on the same page with them.
Yeah, and sort of getting into all the what ifs that I think any of us can end up going down all those what if pathways. And one thing we've been talking a lot about in my office and with our faculty and staff here at the Keck School of Medicine is just dealing with all the uncertainty, especially if you're used to a routine. Alzheimer's or not, a lot of us really love to have our routines. And when we're just dealing with a time of such uncertainty, it can be really, really tough on all of us. So this is where I think some of the mindfulness is useful as well. And I've always noticed that when people go into the what if scenarios, it's always the what if something bad happens scenario. sometimes reminding people, well, what if something good happens, is worth a little bit of a conversation as well. I think I'm going to wrap it up right now. I don't know if you have a closing comment, Dr. Olson?
I would just say that the message that I find resonates to older adults, adult children, and pretty much everybody is the idea that we are all in this together. We are not going to be able to stop this pandemic by thinking about this on an individual basis. We are a community that needs to be connected, and we need to all be doing the right thing every day for the right reasons. And by thinking of it as a group effect, I think we're much more likely to follow through and not feel that sense of panic overtaking us.
Absolutely right. When I think about the Trojan family, I think about that as well as, people really coming together, pulling together, wanting to do the right things for the right reasons and helping our communities. So I really thank everybody for joining us. It was fun to do this with you, Dr. Olson. And I hope this was useful for those who tuned in. And I'll just say, heal on.
Okay. Take care. Stay safe.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and visit us at podcast.usc.edu.